Welcome to Women of a Certain Stage, the podcast redefining how we think about menopause. I'm your host, Lauren Churin, a passionate advocate for breaking the stigma and empowering individuals to navigate this transformational stage of life with confidence and clarity. Here, we're diving into a new era of menopause support, featuring expert advice, real-life stories, and actionable insights. Whether you're curious about building your personal menopause plan or you're looking to make an impact, you're in the right place. Let's embrace the change together. Camille, it is such a great opportunity to be able to speak to you. We've been working together in the Menopause Coach Programme over the last 18 weeks. And it's been amazing cohort, and we've got quite a few people in the medical profession, specifically in the nursing profession, which I know that's your background. So you've been in nursing now for what, over 35 years? I don't want to age you or date you, but you've got a really massive wealth of experience in nursing. Is that right?
Well, I've been fortunate, and particularly in a nursing career, you can move in different areas, and I've done that. So I've been clinical. I've been in the acute area. I've been in kind of clinical research. I've been in academic research, and then I came into teaching, but that pre-university side, and then I went into the university side, and within the university side, I dovetail a bit in obviously the teaching, but research and management. So I've been fortunate to have had quite a range of roles, and I have been in education for about 20 years, and I'm now seeing those clinicians out there leading practice, which is just lovely. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And are you noticing this also? I know that in the cohort you've been on, we had someone who was in the programme who had actually taken a break from her role as a midwife. And one of the reasons behind that was the fact that menopause had come along. She had some other things going on in her life, and she just found that she needed to step away, that the demands of the job had become so overwhelming. And that, combined with her other life events and menopause, became something that had caused her to step away. And when we first started working together, she'd said that she was looking for a new path, a new route forward. And interestingly, having gone through the Menopause Coach Programme, she stepped back into midwifery, which is fantastic. And she's looking at doing menopause coaching on the side. Do you see many people when they get to midlife stepping away from the profession? Or was this just kind of like a one-off thing?
I think, and as we know, that this time is complicated by other things as well. So each person is so individual. They might have other commitments, mm-hmm. and I think the key kind of issue that we're kind of hovering around is, particularly with health and nursing colleagues, is whatever post they're in or whatever responsibilities they have, it is actually quite complicated, and it has been. And I think the pace has changed tremendously as well as these sort of people having huge responsibilities and the expectation to do more with less. And I suppose further complicated is the movement of people. So that some people have a team, and that team may not be well resourced, or there might be shorts. And it's very commonplace, and I hear this all the time. So if someone is on their journey through the menopause, and there is lots of things on the way, and everything else, some people just have to stop, but some people don't. And then I think that's where things can really dovetail and become quite difficult. And people are affected in many different ways, relationships, work, and how they're perceived at work as well. They might be, having trouble talking. And people, and this has come up very recently, Lauren, and I think this might, I don't know if it will shock you, but people are talking about fear. They're quite scared, and this worries me as well in this particular kind of.
Tell me a bit more about that, because I one of the driving factors for me leaving my job was the fact that I didn't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable. I didn't want to be seen as someone who couldn't manage a job. And the perception, I now know, sort of 10, 12 years later, I know that the perception was that I was performing. But at the time, I felt like the perception was going to become that I wasn't fit for purpose for the job. And that was one of the reasons that drove me to leave. But is that the type of fear that you're talking about, or something else?
I think yes, it's that, and just further complicated. I think some individuals are just scared about talking to others at work, or seeking help at work, even though they're giving they and I think on close inspection they might say, might think it's a sign of weakness, but also I think, unfortunately, in some places, it's just not supported well still, despite
Yeah.
all the work that yourself has been doing, and others, and people, and the awareness kind of.
And you're where you work. They've been talking about menopause for quite some time now. So it's not a new topic. It's not like Camille came along, decided to train as a menopause coach, and it's the first time your part of the NHS has done anything about it. This has been going on for a number of years. So, what do you think needs to really happen in order for people to have confidence that organizations do want to support them? Or what do organizations need to do to give their people the confidence that asking for help and support is genuine?
Yeah, I really do think there's a kind of a really difficult kind of culture at the moment in health and social care. There's different sorts of tensions between the demands of work, the resources, and, as I said, doing so much more for less. And when you're trying to kind of keep your team or your workforce up to date with just the care, but also with health and safety and well-being and looking after yourself, you have to create time for them to be released to go and do that, and that in itself is a tension.
Yeah.
Some places can do it beautifully well, but you can't predict what happens in the clinical area. Each shift is different, from hour to hour. We're definitely shift to shift, and so it kind of radically changes. So someone will say have every intention to release someone to go and do an update, or to go and have their support, but if they just simply can't leave the floor because there's not enough people there. And this is very, very common. So if they are doing anything for themselves, it will be outside in their own time. So organizationally, I think we do have to look at that more. And then I think the other thing, a lot of these updates and things like that have been online, and I don't think it's penetrated the real areas of care and attention and well-being that's needed. People need to be face to face.
But when you say, sorry to interrupt, when you say these are online, do you mean people have to find a machine, sit down on their own, go through something that's online, and then therefore what you're saying is that those uptakes are kind of, they're being done, but they're not having the impact that they're meant to have.
Yeah, exactly.
So that,
and the interaction.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that I made a very conscious choice to do with the menopause coach diploma was make sure that we have that interaction. We're not in person, but we're online via Zoom, and we have that human to human contact and breakout opportunity, and people from all over the world coming together, sharing their backgrounds and stories. But coming kind of full circle then back to, your organization has been looking at menopause for nearly 10 years now. So this is not a new topic. It's not something that is just suddenly popping its head up. It's being acknowledged, it's being talked about. The majority of the organisation is female. And we know that across the NHS that somewhere between 70 and 85% in any part of the organisation is female, and that 60-ish% are of peri to postmenopausal age. So it's obviously something that the NHS, along with many, many other organisations, specifically education, is probably the next closest industry, if we want to use that as a terminology, that really needs to understand menopause, but not just understand it, do something practical to support people. So I'm curious, what was it that made you choose to invest your time and effort and energy into the menopause coach diploma? What was it that drove you to choose that as a way forward?
Well, I really wanted to bring my interests on women health and menopause together, and tailor it. I s-
Hmm.
and in how I advise women. So not to be clinical or educative, if you like, but to have it in a way, that is tailored. So it's learning to tailor it, and and I've been working, as I said, in this area for a while, and I've asked the question, kind of what people want,
Hmm.
and they want a tailored conversation, and coaching seems to be the right sort of place. I've done a lot of workplace coaching, and
Hmm.
sort of, I suppose, with my sort of clinical and caring background, and with my education background, where I do mentoring and supervision, coaching now in my kind of leadership role is something that I do every day. But with the research I have been doing in terms of menopause and understanding the workplace, they just sat together really well. And I just thought, for my own personal development,
Hmm.
um, it's a good thing to have, and a good thing to have in my role, at work, in the university, where I do speak to um, a lot of people, a lot of students, a lot of staff at a certain age, but a lot of students of a certain age as well, because our students are older with lots of lived experience. So being able to understand, working people with lots of commitments, and going through, particularly the perimenopausal stuff. We know sometimes it starts earlier in some people, and then
Yeah.
we have so many different people from different cultural heritage at the university, and that again is kind of picking up. But also, it's also knowing my limitations as well, and I think that the course has kind of helped me with that, and reminding people, to seek help when they need it as
Hmm.
well, because I'm not the fountain of all knowledge and information, but
And none of us are, right? I think that's one of the key
exactly that.
things. Often, you remember early in the program with your cohort that people wanted to know all, wanted to have all the answers, and actually, even the experts we get to come and speak in the program, they're expert in their area, but nobody knows everything. And I think when we get comfortable with that, that gives us more power to be able to say to people, "Well, I can support you or provide information or support in this area, but I know someone who can help support in another area." And I think that's really important as well, because none of us is the fountain of all knowledge, because it just doesn't exist.
No, no. And
So
every day, I think we've quoted this a lot, every day is a learning day in the course as
yeah,
well, which has
yeah.
been really good, because with the guest speakers, for example, there's lots of changes or trends, and they've been able to share that with us. So, for the audience, it was, lots of learning, and understanding how things move in the world of
Hmm.
menopause. Things are moving faster, aren't they?
They definitely are now. And I think even in the 18 weeks that we studied together, that there were changes coming out, new drugs coming out, new drugs going into test, new theories, conflicts of theories, different people believing different things. And I think it can be really tough to make sense of all of that. So, with your background from the research side and the education side, what do you think the kind of central tenets to somebody who is maybe trying to learn about menopause and trying to figure out what's fact and fiction? What would be a couple of things you would say to people about finding trusted resources?
Yeah, I think, and that's very key, because the research I have looked at, women want evidence-based material, and they want
Mm.
access to that. So if we are sharing, guiding individuals in their menopause journey, we do need to be using reliable sources. So in the UK, I would go to my main areas, British Menopause Society, and the IMS as well is a good source. As you know, I was lucky to go to the World Congress at that time, and so all countries together actually talking, particularly on one page about HRT and its use, and coming together about bringing evidence-based material together. So I would really.
Can I come back to that just for a minute?
Yeah,
Because, talking about, you were at the event, and I'd love to ask you some questions about that as well. But talking about HRT and having everyone talk about it as if they're singing off the same hymn sheet, on that same page as each other. What were the key messages that came out at the Congress?
About, evidence and having the right evidence, and clinicians, if they're having a patient interaction, is using the guidance, and that guidance is there for a reason. Has been tested and trialed. We have clinical guidance for a reason, for the amount of HRT we use, and those kind of things. And that HRT, for example, is not always suitable for everybody, and there are other ways of providing support and management for that person. I think they're the kind of key things I took, and the mental health aspect came out quite a lot, and I thought that was very interesting.
And so, staying on HRT for a minute, we know, right, and you know more than I do, even with your clinical background and the research background and the education. If we have research and evidence, obviously we need to interrogate how that research has been done, and that's a whole other layer that you really do need to understand what you're talking about when you're diving into the research. And I think that can be really complicated for people to do, because things can be presented as a paper, things can be presented as research, but if it's not been set up effectively, then we have to question the validity of whatever comes out of it, and that can be quite tricky to try and summarize to somebody how you work out the wheat from the chaff. But also, the challenge from some doctors is obviously now, well, we don't have the evidence, we don't have the research, but we need to be pushing the boundaries. We need to be investigating further. And because we don't have the research doesn't mean to say that we can't do. So we end up in a situation where one doctor is saying minimum amount of HRT for the shortest amount of time to treat symptoms. And then another doctor is saying, well, actually, this person's absorption rate of estrogen needs to mean that their HRT prescription is much higher. And that makes sense, right? That makes absolute sense from a common sense point of view, at a base level. So what would you say to somebody who is maybe saying that, you understand that there's evidence to back up what the IMS, the BMS, the now menopause.org is saying. So when you go to a Congress, you get that information, and that absolutely makes sense, and completely buy into that. So how do we counsel somebody who understands that, picks up that information, and then is maybe on a higher dosage, or is on something that feels like it's way outside of the recommended guidelines? Because the guidelines are guidelines for a reason. They're not, you must do this and stay within that box. They're guidelines. So how would you maybe approach someone who has concerns about being outside of those guidelines?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, isn't it, really? But if they have developed a relationship with their practitioner, then they hopefully have developed a good relationship, and that they've been learning to, for example, track their signs and symptoms, so that they're providing information so that the practitioner can help them. Yes, there are guidelines, and they're only guidelines, and ultimately the practitioner is responsible, but the person in that relationship, is giving consent as well, and taking ownership of that as well, of that information. So, and I think what women are saying is also that it's difficult to get to that relationship, and build that relationship. So if I was helping someone, I would be helping them to get to that relationship, so that they would be well informed and have enough information to take ownership and responsibility for for how they want to be and how they
Yeah.
want to manage it.
Yeah.
If they are worried, then we need to signpost them to the right information so that they can look and maybe
Yeah.
just go through that with them. But
Mm.
yeah, it is a difficult one when there are those different clinicians, but I know each individual woman on this journey, it is an individual journey, and their
Very much
symptoms
so.
are their symptoms. And if
Hmm.
they need help, we need to help them find, so that they are comfortable. I mean,
Hmm.
the work that I keep looking at is trying to alleviate the discomfort in
Hmm.
everyday life. And if things aren't right, that they can't manage their own day-to-day things, then they need help. So
Yeah.
it's about kind of helping them to have that relationship with the
Hmm.
right practitioner as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really, really sage advice. And I think one of the things I love talking to Camille is because, you're doing that balance of it's not just about HRT, right? There are many, many other things. And obviously that's my area of expertise, which is what can you do that is non-prescription? What can you do that is lifestyle? And how can the two come together and marry? Because there is no one size fits all. It's not HRT or not HRT or lifestyle or not lifestyle. It's a combination of what works for the individual
Yeah.
person. So thinking back to, you went to the Congress, an amazing opportunity.
Mm.
What were your kind of key takeaways from that event?
Well, one of my biggest takeaways was I went to listen to a lot of research and presented by predominantly medical practitioners. And I can count on my hand that there were very few papers which were co-designed and co-produced with women.
Hmm.
There was one beautiful piece that I listened to, and I thought, oh, will I hear many more? And I thought that is, I really thought that was an issue for me, and I went there to present on specifically that thing
Hmm.
about including women's voices in menopause research, and I suppose by being there, I got a real feel of the clinicians coming together, and I think at the beginning of, just literally at the turn of the year, I started to see some of the dialogue coming through, and
Hmm.
I do think any research we do in healthcare should be around and with and involve those who are the experienced. They're the ones that are living the experience. They're the experts. And if we're saying it's complicated, it's variable, it's this and this, then we need to listen, because it's not
Yeah.
just about sleep or moods or hot flushes.
If only, right? If only it was just one
Yeah,
symptom we
we would
had to
get
manage.
yeah, and I just, I think that was one of the key things. I mean, I absolutely enjoyed listening to experts.
Yeah.
There was a real amazing practitioner on sleep and the mental health side of things. I went to listen to as well, and and all brilliant stuff. And one of the things we are seeing also is how many women are also entering mental health services for the first time in this age group. And I just, even talking to you now gives me goosebumps, because what are we doing?
Yeah.
Having, where the person is at their wits end coming into a service, a mental health service.
Yeah.
So, and and
Oh,
that's
I'm actually getting quite emotional because
yeah,
I've just got to interject for a second. So
yeah,
4 years after I left work thinking of early onset dementia, I was on the panel at Bristol City Council in Chambers, and the topic was menopause, and we had a researcher. We had a bunch of very what I think of very esteemed people, and then there was me, and I was kind of like, well, it's just like little me. I'm the person with lived experience who's trying to educate other people based on my experience and what I'd been learning. And I remember I remember sitting in chambers and someone put their hand up when it came to questions, and they said, this is a question for Lauren. And, there was me sitting there going, feeling a little bit little compared to some of these amazing people with all this incredible research. But equally, I was the one going out to organizations and supporting organizations to learn about menopause and support their people through it. So I felt I had something to say. So she took a breath and then she looked at me like from the back of chambers. You remember she was wearing a red scarf. I remember really staring at me, and she said, "So, Lauren, you had mental health issues then when you went through your menopause?" I remember pausing and taking a beat, and my chest got really, really tight, and I could feel the tears behind my eyes, and I had to take a really big breath, because up till that point, even although I was 4 years post-menopause, I never once had admitted to myself, although I knew, I'd never once admitted to myself that I had mental health issues when I went through my menopause experience. I remember sitting there going, I took a breath in, I just squeaked out the word, yeah, I did. But it took me 4 years after the event to actually acknowledge and say publicly what I'd gone through, because I so associated having mental health issues with being weak and vulnerable. And I still associated being weak and vulnerable as not being of any value. And it took me 4 years afterwards. And I see it in my clients all the time. I see it in my coaching clients all the time now that, clearly there are mental health issues. There's a mental health impact if you're not set up properly to recognize what you're going through when you're becoming perimenopausal. So what were the kind of key things that came out from that when mental health was being discussed?
I suppose it's the first, usually when someone is in a mental health service, there is a long history or histories of maybe some trauma or something like that. What the talks I was listening to were about first presentations, and not kind of linking it in with the changes. And I suppose the other thing is there's not a lot of research in that also, which was being highlighted. But and also just making the connection between the age of when perimenopause starts and that kind of transition things can happen, and the fluctuations, I suppose, in the hormones and things like that, and all not the fluctuations, but the fluctuations initially, then also the very kind of drop of estrogen. And also on the other side, when receiving patients is how to assess. So a more holistic assessment needs to happen, not just mental health. So there is a big debate in mental health services, and I only know this from my own perspective in nursing, is in mental health understanding more of the physical sides that happen as well, and not to have that disconnection. And that's quite clearly there is the physical and the mental side, particularly in the changes in the woman over time, and that connection needs to be really seen when somebody's entering the services, to absolutely check where they are for whatever reason, and of course there may be an underlying reason that has come, and if it has, then they're in the right place. But if there is any way we can, is just to check that if it is hormone related, as in the transition, then there are ways we absolutely can help them. So it's, and then early assessment, and it would help obviously the person, but also help services as well, because it's really, really big demands at the moment.
And I think, one of the people that I've been following closely over the last few years and had the honour to deliver a webinar with and have conversations with is Dame Professor Leslie Regan. And her central tenet is that women have very predictable health challenges throughout their life. We know they're going to menstruate. We know there could be fertility issues. We know that they can get pregnant. We know that they're going to go through menopause. So actually, if we were having conversations early on, if we had all women's services in one hub, whether that's digital or physical or a combination. And the services were built around the woman rather than the woman having to go to lots of disparate places to get the help and support. Then her files would be centralized, the way she was managed would be centralized, and that would very much speak to what you've just been talking about, which is not isolating the mental from the physical health. And I understand why, I can only talk about the UK, but I can understand why our health service has grown up into these silos of different types of health, because that allows people to specialize and it allows people to develop their skills. But if you're not having that cross-functional conversation, those kind of case conversations about an individual. So, for example, I have a child who at one point was under 5 different consultants, but they met every 3 months to discuss his case. They had a lead consultant who was the primary consultant because the issue in her area, in this particular case, was the leading cause of the other consultants being involved. And that meant that all conversations, all discussions, all decisions that were being made about treatment pathways was based on a collective view, and everyone could speak up for their expertise, and then together they could understand. And I can see how blessed and fortunate that was in his care, because, it's been, thank goodness, it's been very successful. But we don't have that in adult care. We don't see that in adult care at all anywhere in the UK, neither private nor NHS. And so it's not a private versus state issue. It's an issue. So with the I have to ask the question, obviously, because it's one of the reasons we're having the conversation. But, with the menopause coach diploma, how do you help that? How do you think that maybe plays a small part in anyone who works in the NHS having that additional knowledge to be able to support people going forward?
For me, having the course, or just generally? So
both.
For both. I mean, for the course, it's absolutely the general awareness, but I think I suppose becoming a menopause coach, particularly the participants, the majority of the participants bring with them quite a lot of knowledge, so are shaping and can use that knowledge to, like I said, tailor their advice now. And I think it's important to, I suppose, what the course does is reminds us to make sure you're up to date in those things, and to particularly in areas of menopause, but in the areas that are highlighted in the program, and can help tailor and signpost to whoever that you're with. So in my organisation, it will help me as a coach, because predominantly all my coachees, that's the word I was thinking of, are women of a certain age, and sometimes the things that are troubling them are complicated by their own personal journeys. So I think a program like this is absolutely, I would say, essential for organisations where you have a third of your workforce of women of a certain age. So where I cross along health and social care, obviously that's pertinent. I'm not clinical anymore, but my colleagues who are, it's important that they should have access. And also in education, predominantly teachers, lecturers, and people who work in higher education institutions are of a certain age, or are living with someone of a certain age as well, and are or working with someone else. So if you're in a meeting, or if you're in a a class, or colleagues, and the organisation is absolutely a third of women, and I think when you were talking about the lifespan approach, and understanding women's health, those key events, we give so much attention to, I suppose, maternity leave and things like that.
Yeah.
But we forget the everyday things, like having a period, or some women have really, really heavy periods, And that
Yeah.
happens all the way through till you stop having periods, which is menopause. And so that journey, you know, is not really looked at.
Yeah.
So it definitely has a place for all organisations, because, as you said earlier, we're living longer but working longer, and
Hmm.
and we're the fastest growing workforce. You know, we're coming back.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
absolutely tell you that, because our students, predominantly our apprenticeship students, are older students coming back
Yeah.
into education, coming back to start their second or third career cycle, and sometimes struggling, you know,
Yeah.
because brain fog gets in the way, um, having a panic attack or anxiety for just small things, and we forget that, you know,
Yeah.
they could be starting that journey. So yeah, we do need to be reminded.
And I think that's really interesting. So a lot of anyone listening who is in their, maybe 20, 30 years into their career, actually the apprenticeships, if you're looking for a career change, there is an opportunity to do up to degree level study
Yeah,
through an apprentice scheme, which is a big win for an employer and for the individual because you get so much support. And they're definitely something that they're worth looking at. So if you are someone listening and you are interested in maybe doing a career change or, upskilling yourself, if you are looking at that, have a look at the apprenticeship schemes that are out there, because there's so much opportunity now to upskill yourself. And even if you have studied in the past, this is still an opportunity for you. So that's a really good point. You're an older adult, you've got experience, or you might be someone coming into the workforce for the first time. You might have raised your family and then be
yeah,
coming
yeah,
back into, you might be then be coming into the workforce. So if you're doing that in combination with menopause, that lack of self-esteem, that lack of self-confidence that can come as a result of menopause symptoms is really real. And, it's challenging enough to go and put yourself out into the situation to go and learn something new, let alone not being prepared to the fact that there might be something else going on in the background inside yourself that could impact how you're going to approach that. So yeah, that's a really, really great point. And I think the apprenticeship schemes is a brilliant scheme. I love it. I think it's so good, both for employers and for
yeah.
people
It's
that
a
go through
win-win
that.
situation.
Yeah,
It's hard, but it's, I think, very rewarding for those
yeah,
who want to change. And again, you know, and we often forget, particularly those older ones, carry a lot of commitment. So children, most of them, the children are grown up that I've seen, but you know, there's lots of things, and
yeah,
the menopause, or their sort of transition just throws a complete angle. So, you know, lots of people can sail through, and we know
yeah.
that. But sometimes, you know, people need a lot of help, and we just shouldn't make assumptions, and that support should be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Camille, thank you so much for all your time today. What would you say to someone who's maybe sitting on the fence about training to become a menopause coach? What would you say to them in their decision-making process?
Absolutely, 100%. It's if you are interested in menopause and health and well-being, this sort of a coaching course is something that will help ground you, will make you think, be a critical thinker, and sort of a consumer of ideas. But we have to be knowledgeable consumers, and it helps improve your toolkit. Or if you haven't done it for the first time, gives you a set of toolkits
Yeah.
that can take you forward.
Camille, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real honour. I'm grateful for you making the time to have this conversation. And I can't wait to see you again in our grad sessions and hear how you implement all the knowledge that you've already got and integrate it with what we've done together, and hear some more of your success stories going forward. Camille, thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining me on Women of a Certain Stage. I hope today's episode inspired you to think differently about menopause and the incredible opportunities this stage of life brings. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends who need to hear this message. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach even more people. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Lauren Turin, or visit our website at womenofacertainstage.com to learn more about menopause coaching, inspiring events, and corporate training. Until next time, let's continue making a difference, one conversation at a time.